South Heaven no longer sounded like a battlefield. It sounded worse, like villages cheering while they butchered the god who once ruled them. In recap, Tales of Herding Gods, chapter 1625, the mighty Fire Heavenly Venerate staggers across a blood-soaked land, abandoned by disciples, hunted by mortals, and betrayed by the very world he believed he controlled. Even as his divine treasures collapse and black dog blood stains his shattered body, he still dreams of survival, of crawling back to Qin Mu, twisting truth into glory, and reclaiming power from the ashes. But beneath the world tree, Qin Mu is waiting in silence. No grand judgment, no furious speech, only the sound of snapping fingers, and death repeating itself again and again. Tonight's chapter is not the fall of a heavenly venerate. It is the slow destruction of a man forced to face every soul he crushed beneath his ambition. There are moments in the path of cultivation where a single drop of blood is not just injury, but judgment. And for Fire Heavenly Venerate, that judgment begins with something as absurd as a splash of black dog's blood. He stands at the peak of existence, one of the highest heavenly venerates of the old order. Yet in this moment, he is battered, humiliated, and dragged down by mortals who should never have been able to touch him. That alone already tells us something important about this chapter. Power is no longer absolute. The old hierarchy of gods is cracking, and even a heavenly venerate can be reduced to something painfully fragile when fate turns against him. But what truly breaks the situation is not the villagers. It is the symbolism of corruption entering his divine body. The black dog's blood seeps into a wound left by a previous divine strike, contaminating his glabella and brain. In cultivation terms, this is more than injury. It represents a collapse in his divine authority, a crack in the godhood that once made him untouchable. And the moment panic should have set in, it doesn't. Instead, violence answers first. Fire Heavenly Venerate retaliates with overwhelming force, erasing an entire village in an instant. Women, children, everyone, wiped out without hesitation. This is where the story shifts from survival to moral collapse. Because at this point, he is no longer fighting enemies. He is erasing witnesses. And here is the uncomfortable truth the narrative forces us to face. He still believes he is righteous. He convinces himself that these people owe their survival to him, that without his protection, they would have been nothing. This is the classic psychology of fallen divinity, when a being who once stood above all begins rewriting morality to protect their ego. But survival doesn't end his descent. It accelerates it. As he travels toward eternal peace, we see his mind working constantly, calculating not just escape, but reputation. He is not simply trying to live. He is trying to control the story of his survival. He imagines using Qin Mu, Heavenly Venerate Yun, and Heavenly Venerate Yu as emotional leverage, figuring out who will pity him, who will protect him, and how he can transform betrayal into a heroic narrative. This is one of the most important psychological layers in the chapter. Fire Heavenly Venerate is not only escaping death, and he is trying to escape accountability. He believes history is something you can negotiate. But the world he enters is no longer the old Heavenly Court era. South Heaven has already been ordered to hunt him. Every village becomes both a checkpoint and a battlefield. And every time he passes through one, the same cycle repeats: suspicion, confrontation, massacre. Yet what is fascinating is that he does not see himself as a monster. He reframes every kill as necessity. Every corpse becomes proof of persecution. Every step forward becomes a righteous march toward revenge. This is what cultivation deviation looks like on a conceptual level, not just damaged meridians, but a distorted Tao heart. Eventually, he reaches a divine city expecting refuge, or at least familiarity. Instead, he finds betrayal waiting. His disciple Yan Yazi, someone he personally cultivated, stands at the center of the city's silence. And this is where the emotional core of the chapter sharpens. Because betrayal in Wuxia isn't just political, it is philosophical. Yan Yazi represents a younger moral order. He quotes loyalty to the heavenly emperor, speaks of righteousness, and rejects his master not out of ambition alone, but conviction. And that is what hurts most. Fire Heavenly Venerate is not facing enemies who want power. He is facing disciples who believe he is wrong. The battle that follows is brutal but layered. On the surface, it is master versus disciples, overwhelming physical strength versus coordinated technique. But underneath, it is a clash between two interpretations of loyalty. Fire Heavenly Venerate relies on experience and overwhelming physical divinity. Even injured, his Heavenly Venerate body remains terrifying. But Yanyazi is cautious, strategic, and more importantly, prepared to sacrifice everything for what he believes is moral justice. The result is inevitable, but not clean. The disciples are slaughtered. The city is filled with death. Yet Yanyazi survives, wounded but persistent, continuing the pursuit like a flame that refuses to go out. And here is where strategy enters the story. Fire Heavenly Venerate realizes something crucial. He cannot afford prolonged conflict. His cultivation foundation is collapsing, so he retreats, regathers, and even begins reconstructing his cultivation system using eternal peace reforms he once dismissed. This detail is extremely important world-building-wise. It shows that the eternal peace system is not just an alternative path. It is now so influential that even fallen Heavenly Venerates are forced to adapt to it in order to survive. But adaptation comes too late. Yanyazi destroys his escape bridge, cutting off his route to eternal peace. And from that moment onward, Fire Heavenly Venerate is no longer escaping towards safety. He is being herded. Then comes the turning point. He meets Qin Mu under the World Tree. This is not a rescue. It is an intervention. At first, Fire Heavenly Venerate believes he has found salvation. He assumes Qin Mu is here to mediate, to control the situation, to offer him another political path out. That assumption reveals how deeply he still misunderstands Qin Mu, because Qin Mu does not negotiate here. He resets. With a single divine action, Fire Heavenly Venerate's injuries are healed, but only as a prelude. His cultivation is stripped away, his power reduced to that of an ordinary mortal. This is one of the most terrifying techniques in the story. Not killing the body, but erasing the foundation of existence itself. And then the real punishment begins. He is thrown into cycles of death at the hands of ordinary villagers, again, and again, and again. This repetition is not torture in the traditional sense. It is dismantling identity. Each cycle removes a layer of his confidence, his arrogance, and his belief that he is above consequence. The fact that villagers, people he once called bugs, are the ones killing him is intentional. It reverses his worldview completely. What Qin Mu is doing here is not simply revenge. It is philosophical correction. He is demonstrating that power without moral grounding is reversible, that divine status is not immunity, and that Heavenly Venerate is just a title when stripped of cultivation. Finally, when repetition no longer brings satisfaction, Qin Mu ends it, not with rage, but with dismissal. A simple gesture collapses Fire Heavenly Venerate's remaining existence, body, soul, and essence, until nothing remains but chaotic residue that disperses into the world. The message is clear. Even legends can be erased without spectacle when they have already been emptied of meaning. And yet, the most chilling part is not the death itself. It is Qin Mu's conclusion. That even after countless deaths, the villagers remain unchanged. The corruption of the world is not solved by revenge alone. It requires something deeper than punishment. So the question the story leaves us with is this: if killing a Heavenly Venerate does not fix the world, then what does? And more importantly, when gods fall so easily, what exactly remains sacred in this cultivation world anymore? In the vast currents of the heavens, there are moments when power does not roar. It quietly rearranges the world. And in this chapter, everything shifts beneath a calm sky. On a golden ship drifting through the void, Qin Mu looks down at the glittering southern heavens, bright like scattered pearls across an endless cosmic sea. But beauty, in his eyes, only deepens the weight of memory, because someone has just fallen from the stage of history. Heavenly Venerate Fire. Once a rising star in the Dragon Han era, once a young man with passion, talent, and a clean Tao heart, Qin Mu remembers him not as a tyrant, not as a god of cold ambition, but as someone who still knew how to laugh, how to argue, how to feel. And that is the real tragedy here. Not death, but erosion. Qin Mu reflects on a brutal truth of cultivation worlds. When power grows unchecked, the original self is often the first thing to die. Heavenly Venerate Fire didn't simply lose a battle. He lost the version of himself that could have walked a different path. The moment Imperial Emperor fell, something inside him collapsed and never returned. That memory alone sets the emotional tone of this entire chapter. This is not just war between experts. It is a graveyard of former selves. Meanwhile, on the chessboard of the heavens, another shift is unfolding. Absolute beginning stands against the great heavenly emperor, but the arrival of Madame Yuan Mu ends everything before it can truly escalate. Not through destruction, but through certainty. Absolute beginning understands instantly the balance is gone, so he retreats, not as a coward, but as someone choosing survival over a losing game. And in that retreat, the new order speaks. Heavenly Emperor Hao does not shout. He does not need to. His authority is expressed in a single, cold command. Lang Xuan must die, even if it means the retired emperor himself must deliver the head. This is what imperial rule looks like at its purest form in this world, not persuasion, not justice, but delegation of irreversible violence. Then comes the political fracture beneath the 10 heavenly venerates. Ancient god Taiji refuses to follow absolute beginning. Taiyin and Taiyang also step away from neutrality. Each claims they still seek the Tao, still refine themselves in the mortal world. But the truth is clearer than their words. No one in this world stands outside the tide of power. Not anymore. Absolute beginning recognizes it with bitter clarity. These beings are no longer allies. They are opportunists, shaped by whichever current is strongest. And so he laughs, not in joy, but in recognition. A laugh that carries exhaustion from seeing the same pattern repeat across eras. Everyone eventually becomes what the system forces them to be. Even gods. Heavenly Emperor Hao's control tightens further. He does not just demand obedience. He reorganizes the future itself. Even exile becomes a form of control. Even retirement becomes a political prison disguised as mercy. The east extreme heaven is offered like a sanctuary, but it is really a cage with silk walls. And in this structure, the Heavenly Emperor's message is simple. You may live, but only where I allow. Back aboard the golden ship, Qin Mu and Qin Fengqing analyze the deeper storm. The Taiji gods controlling Xuandu and Yudu are not just powerful, they are systemic threats. If Yudu falls fully under Heavenly Venerate Void, then even death itself becomes a controlled domain. The entire cycle of life and reincarnation risks becoming a weapon. This is why Qin Mu is not relaxed, even after victories elsewhere. Because the true war is not on battlefields. It is in domains of existence itself. And within this web, one truth stands out. The 10 heavenly venerates are no longer individuals. They are a locked infrastructure, a closed system. Once you enter it, escape becomes nearly impossible. Even betrayal feeds the system rather than breaking it. That is the real horror Qin Mu is observing. Not enemies, but entrapment. Then the focus shifts quietly, but sharply. Heavenly Venerate Fire still has a reincarnation in eternal peace, and someone must erase it. But as always in this world, assassination is never just assassination. It is a selection of fate. Ling Yushu steps forward, not as a passive ruler, but as someone actively shaping the survival of her nation. She sends a request to Xing An, a name from the forgotten edges of history, a man who once stood at the peak of eternal peace's intellectual and martial evolution, and then chose isolation instead of fame. 500 years produce saints, but also produce monsters who refuse recognition. Xing An is one of them. When he receives the mission, Xing An does not hesitate. And when he finds the reincarnation of Heavenly Venerate Fire, Dui, the result is swift. But what matters is not the death itself. It is the method. The clash is not just strength versus strength, but Tao realm against Tao realm. Layers upon layers of comprehension collide. 30 heavens of Tao insight unfolding like invisible worlds pressing against reality. This is cultivation at its most refined stage. Not brute force, but understanding weaponized. And Dui falls. Not because he is weak, but because he has chosen to fall. His existence is erased, and with it, one branch of Heavenly Venerate Fire's continuation collapses entirely. But the moment that thread snaps, something more unsettling appears. Another young man remains, and he is not surprised. He is not afraid. He already knows the outcome. That confidence alone signals something important. This is not an ordinary survivor. This is someone who stands above the usual cycle of reincarnation-level struggles. And Xing An, looking at him, reaches a conclusion that cuts deeper than words. This body is valuable, not just worth killing, worth keeping. And here lies the quiet philosophical turn of the chapter. In a world where identities are replaced, reincarnations hunted, and heavenly titles pass like currency, what defines a person anymore? Is Heavenly Venerate Fire truly gone if fragments of him still walk, or is identity simply a pattern the heavens keep copying until someone forcibly deletes it? Xing'an's final decision hints at a darker truth of eternal peace's evolution. Even enemies are no longer just enemies. They are assets. Bodies become tools, souls become data, and power is simply the right to decide what continues and what ends. As the golden ship drifts onward, Qin Mu's earlier melancholy echoes again, because every death here is not just an ending. It is a transfer of ownership, of fate, of history. And the next storm is already forming, quietly, inevitably, just beyond the horizon of the heavens. There are moments in the world of immortals when a single person stops feeling like a cultivator and starts feeling like a natural disaster wearing human skin. That is exactly what happens when the man called the Madman of Chu appears on the battlefield. No grand entrance, no ceremonial aura, just a calm voice that cuts through tension like a blade. Collect. One word. And it is already enough to make even a reincarnated Heavenly Emperor feel uneasy, because standing before him is not an ordinary opponent. It is the reincarnation of Heavenly Emperor Haoqian, a being who once ruled at the peak of heaven itself. Yet even he hesitates for a fraction of a moment, sensing something deeply wrong about the young man in front of him. This is not the arrogance of a ruler. It is something colder, something analytical. The man who treats gods like puzzles, Xing'an, known across certain circles as the Madman of Chu, does something most cultivators would consider unthinkable. He doesn't just fight enemies, he studies them, he dissects them. Even the corpse of Heavenly Venerate Fire's reincarnation becomes, to him, nothing more than a living textbook of divine structure. In his eyes, a god's body is not sacred, it is architecture. Bones, meridians, divine palaces, soul structures, everything is laid bare like an open diagram. With a single gesture, he breaks the body apart into perfect analytical sections, exposing every hidden layer of cultivation. To normal cultivators, this is horrifying. To Xing'an, this is understanding. And here is the terrifying implication. In the world of tales of herding gods, power is not only about raw strength, it is about comprehension of divine systems. Xing'an doesn't just fight within that system, he reverse engineers it. A cultivation method turned inside out. What he discovers from the corpse is not just injury, it is logic. Two major systems of power clash inside the enemy. One based on innate one qi, the primal unity of existence. The other rooted in the return to ruins. A force that collapses and devours order itself. Most would see chaos. Xing'an sees structure, and worse, he sees flaw, because every technique, no matter how divine, has an order, and order can be optimized, rearranged, broken. He calmly points out that the enemy has reached a terrifying level of cultivation, 30 layers of Tao comprehension, but still carries inefficiencies in how those layers are arranged. Not because the power is weak, but because the mind behind it is not precise enough. That single statement is more insulting than any curse, and yet Xing'an says it like he is discussing mathematics. The horror hidden in his chest. Then comes the part that truly unsettles even a heavenly emperor. He opens his chest. Inside are not treasures, not weapons, but brains. Dozens, no, hundreds of divine and demonic intellects extracted from dead gods and immortal beings. Each one still functioning in isolation, still thinking, still computing. Connected together, they form a living calculation matrix, a biological divine computing array. While most civilizations in the immortal world refine artifacts, Xing'an refines cognition itself. Dead brains become nodes, thoughts become algorithms. Divine insight becomes raw processing power. This is the moment where even Heavenly Emperor Haoqian's reincarnation begins to understand. This man does not fight like a cultivator, he fights like a system designer of reality. And worse, he is improving. The philosophy of the madman Xing'an even explains his logic with unsettling sincerity. Living minds are messy, full of emotion, bias, and distraction. But once dead, the brain becomes pure function. Remove desire, and what remains is computation. To him, intelligence is not morality, it is efficiency. This is why he can analyze divine techniques faster than any sect, any heavenly court, any emperor lineage, because he is not thinking alone. He is thinking with thousands of dead minds at once. And somewhere in this madness lies a disturbing truth about cultivation itself in Tales of Herding Gods. The higher one climbs, the more cultivation resembles optimization of existence rather than spiritual enlightenment. The turning point, when analysis becomes execution. But observation was never the end, it was preparation. Xing An has already seen through the structure of his opponent's technique. Every weakness, every imbalance in the dual heavenly court system, every unstable interaction between opposing Tao forces, it is all mapped. So when battle finally begins, it is not a clash of unknowns, it is a solved equation. The reincarnated Heavenly Emperor unleashes his full power, two heavenly courts forming opposing cosmic wheels, light and dark rotating in perfect imperial symmetry. The technique is overwhelming, refined over countless lifetimes. And yet, the moment Xing An touches it, everything destabilizes. Not by force, but by correction. He inserts a single error term into the structure, just one, and the entire system begins to collapse inward on itself, like a perfectly engineered machine discovering a fatal flaw in its own logic. That is all it takes. Because in Xing An's worldview, perfection is not destroyed by greater power, it is destroyed by better understanding. The fall of a heavenly emperor's plan. The result is swift and humiliating. The reincarnated emperor tries to stabilize his divine wheels, but opposing forces begin to annihilate each other. His own technique becomes his enemy. His body becomes unstable. His soul begins to separate under forced extraction methods that feel more like scientific disassembly than combat. Even escape becomes meaningless. Because Xing An is not trying to overpower him, he is trying to collect him, like a specimen, like data. And in the final moments, even the Heavenly Emperor is forced to acknowledge something terrifying. This madman is not improvising. He is refining reality itself like a research project. Closing reflection. The danger of pure rational cultivation. What makes Xing An so frightening is not cruelty, it is absence of hesitation. Where others see life, he sees structure. Where others see death, he sees reusable computation. And where others see gods, he sees systems waiting to be optimized. In a world where cultivation is supposed to lead to transcendence, Xing An represents another path entirely, the path where enlightenment becomes engineering. So the question remains as he walks away, carrying his collection of divine remnants. If even a heavenly emperor can be reduced to a flaw in a formula, then what exactly is safe in this world anymore? And more importantly, how long before Xing An decides that even gods are not complex enough and begins designing better ones? When the heavenly court believes it has finally stabilized its realm of gods, a funeral turns into a political performance, a marriage becomes a strategic retreat, and even a severed head begins whispering the truth of who really holds the Tao of power. This is not simply a tale of mourning. It is a chessboard where emperors bury enemies, bury friends, and sometimes bury the truth itself. The storm begins with blood in the highest heavens. The Fire Celestial Master is declared a traitor, accused of killing newly risen divine officials. For a brief moment, panic spreads through the heavenly court like cracks in glass. But just as quickly, the narrative is rewritten. The Fire Celestial Master is executed. Order is restored. And what follows is not justice, but ceremony. His disciple, Yan Yazi, steps forward alone into the heavenly court. Not to resist, not to rebel, but to apologize on behalf of his master, carrying a loyalty so extreme it becomes unsettling even to immortals. The heavenly emperor, Haotian, responds with calculated mercy. The Fire Celestial Master is stripped of higher honors, yet still buried with celestial dignity. But behind this grand compassion lies something colder, control, because the body being buried is not even real. A substitute corpse is placed in the coffin, surrounded by treasures and buried in a constructed mausoleum. Yan Yazi weeps so violently, he nearly collapses into death itself, performing grief so intense that even the court officials begin to question whether loyalty has become a kind of madness. And here is the subtle truth. The heavenly court refuses to say aloud. In this world, loyalty is often indistinguishable from performance. Then the funeral expands. 3 celestial masters fall into the same ceremony: Fire, Yin, and Azure Dragon. The Yin celestial master receives only a symbolic burial. The Azure Dragon is so incomplete that even divine craftsmen are ordered to rebuild his body from celestial metals, stitching dignity back onto broken remains. Even the Heavenly Emperor himself cries at the funeral. But these tears are not weakness. They are authority in its most refined form. A ruler who can mourn publicly can also decide what is remembered and what is erased. And once the rituals end, the real restructuring begins. The heavenly court is reorganized into directional divine authorities. New celestial venerates are appointed. Power is redistributed like spoils after war. What looks like mourning is actually governance, and what looks like grief is transition. But the real shift happens in private. A jade box is delivered to Hao Tian. Inside it lies a head, not just any head, but Yu Kangxi, the reincarnation vessel of Emperor Langshuan, a living relic of an older emperor buried inside a container like an offering. Hao Tian speaks casually to it, almost warmly, but every word is pressure disguised as conversation. Langshuan responds without fear. No begging, no rage, only acceptance, because in this world, even emperors understand the final law. The winner writes history. The heavenly emperor smiles and ends him. The head is crushed. The soul is sent into the returning ruins to be erased. For a moment, Hao Qian believes the matter is resolved. Then something unexpected happens. A fragment of soul returns from a lower world clone, like an insult thrown back from reality itself. For the first time, Hao Tian's calm cracks. He is furious, not because of injury, but because of humiliation. A barbarian from below has interfered with his perfection. Yet, just as quickly, his anger transforms. Because rulers like him do not waste talent, they evaluate it. He begins to see Qin Mu, not as an enemy, but as a tool that understands flaws in divine cultivation itself, a being capable of refining even heaven's methods. So instead of killing him, Hao Tian assigns him, bring him in, not as prey, but as asset. And thus the Qin Mu guards are dispatched with a portrait that is almost comically useless, a distorted drawing of a man, accompanied by absurd clues like a divine weapon-like appearance and an indistinct dog beside him. This is where divine bureaucracy reveals its absurd side. Even gods, it seems, cannot draw clearly. The search leads them to eternal peace, and here the tone of the world shifts entirely. What they find is not chaos, but celebration, lanterns. Festive banners, a capital city in motion. But beneath the surface, political gravity is shifting again. Emperor Yanshu abdicates. The former Emperor Yanfeng returns to power. The imperial preceptor position changes hands. Power cycles like tides rather than crowns. And at the center of all this, a wedding rumor that sounds almost too absurd for the heavens. Qin Mu, Heavenly Venerate Mu, is preparing to marry Princess Xu after stepping down. Not conquest, not rebellion, marriage, event the Qin Wu guards struggle to process it. A divine figure who once shook heaven itself, retiring for love, but eternal peace officials confirm it calmly as if discussing weather. This is not scandal to them. It is strategy, a controlled withdrawal, a political pause wrapped in ceremony. And behind it lies something sharper. Qin Mu is not escaping heaven. He is stepping away at the exact moment his presence becomes inconvenient for both heaven and eternal peace. A temporary disappearance with purpose. Meanwhile, Hao Qian hears the report, and instead of anger, he laughs. Because from his perspective, this is ideal. A powerful anomaly choosing retirement is better than one choosing rebellion. He even sends gifts, celebratory offerings disguised as goodwill. But his words betray his real thought. Let him disappear. Let him relax. Let him believe peace is real, because a resting blade is easier to measure. Back in eternal peace, another layer unfolds. Yanfeng and Jiang Baigi analyze the situation with quiet seriousness. They understand something the Qin Wu guards do not. This wedding is not romance, it is timing, a deliberate pause in the flow of political conflict. By stepping down, Qin Mu and Princess Xu are shifting pressure away from eternal peace, buying time against Heavenly Court's expansion. Even negotiations with heaven become delayed by this single event. But there is unease beneath the strategy, because even they admit it, Qin Mu does not retire like a man escaping war. He retires like someone preparing for the next phase of a far larger cycle. So what is this chapter really telling us? It is not about funerals, not about weddings, not even about emperors. It is about control, how every system, whether divine or mortal, disguises strategy as emotion. Grief becomes politics. Marriage becomes diplomacy. Retirement becomes hidden preparation. And somewhere between all of it, Qin Mu stands at the center of a storm that everyone tries to interpret, but no one fully understands. Because in a world where even gods manipulate truth, the most dangerous act is not rebellion. It is stepping out of the board before anyone realizes the game has changed. And the question left hanging is simple. Is Qin Mu truly retiring, or is heaven finally being forced to wait for him? There are moments in the immortal world when battle doesn't arrive with thunder, but with silence disguised as celebration. A wedding day in eternal peace should have been joy itself. Instead, it feels like the calm before a storm that everyone can already see, but no one dares name aloud. Because when a man like Qin Mu gets married, the real question isn't whether the world will celebrate. It's how many gods, monarchs, and hidden powers will quietly show up to decide what this marriage really means for the fate of heaven and earth. And in this case, even the moon decides to descend. The city that pretends to be calm. Eternal peace looks alive with celebration. Streets filled with envoys. Capitals overflowing with officials. The world's great factions sending gifts as if peace itself has finally settled. But beneath that noise is anxiety. Because people close to the palace know something unsettling. This wedding is not just love. It is politics wrapped in red silk. It is a shield, a declaration, a gamble. Even the most powerful cultivators understand this marriage has one hidden purpose: to stabilize Qin Mu's position between heaven court and the mortal realm. A pause in divine judgment, disguised as happiness. That alone makes it dangerous. When paranoia becomes protection. Inside the administrative heart of eternal peace, Granny C is already in full crisis mode. Her instinct is simple. If something important is happening, assume everything will go wrong. She assigns watchers, not just for enemies, but for unpredictable allies. A fox spirit drunk in a tavern? Dangerous. A scheming minister? Dangerous. Foreign warrior brides? Extremely dangerous. Even ancient monarch-level beings are added to the list, because in her mind, power doesn't guarantee restraint. It only guarantees more creative ways to cause chaos. This is one of the most human truths in this story. In a world of immortals, stability is never natural. It is constantly enforced by fear, planning, and exhaustion, a drunk fox and a warning sign. Among the chaos, one incident stands out, not because it is powerful, but because it is unstable. Hu Linger is found completely intoxicated, half transformed, rambling about titles, legitimacy, and forgotten promises. She is not threatening the world, but she is revealing something more important. Even those who helped build this new era still feel uncertain where they belong in it. Her drunken speech isn't nonsense. It's emotional residue from a system where everyone has fought too long to simply feel secure. She is quickly escorted away, but the mood lingers because instability doesn't need strength, it only needs timing. The moon that leaves its throne, then comes the moment no one planned for. The sky itself shifts. The moon is missing, and in its place, a presence descends into the mortal world. Inside Qin Mu's residence, moonlight gathers unnaturally, as if reality has folded inward. The explanation is simple, but impossible. The moon has come down, but not as an accident, as a visitor. This is where cultivation storytelling becomes something deeper. Even celestial bodies are not truly passive. They can be refined, controlled, transformed into tools, or even walking entities of intent. The moon here is not just light, it is a decision. And that decision belongs to Baikare, a bride, a blade, and a quiet negotiation. Inside the moonlight domain, there is no chaos, only controlled distance. Baikare meets Qin Mu not in confrontation, but in restrained proximity, as if even emotion itself must be measured carefully. Their interaction is subtle, almost touching, then pulling back, not because of weakness, because of awareness. In this world, even a fingertip connection can shift political reality. What looks like hesitation is actually control. Two individuals who understand that desire, timing, and power are all interconnected weapons. The moon rises again, slowly returning to the sky. But something has already been confirmed. Qin Mu's personal relationships are no longer private matters. They are celestial events. Analysis. Why this interruption matters. The appearance of Baikare during a wedding is not romance. It is a signal. It tells us three things. First, Qin Mu is not just marrying a political partner. He is surrounded by multiple forces that still have unresolved emotional and strategic ties to him. Second, Baikare's presence shows that even beings of sword-level authority cannot fully detach from mortal affairs. And third, the most important, eternal peace is no longer a protected zone. It is a convergence point, where heaven, moon, and mortal destiny overlap. The real wedding begins. After the celestial interruption fades, the real flood arrives. Envoys from countless worlds appear. Familiar figures return. Strategists, scholars, warriors, rulers from distant realms. Even ancient academies and emperors send their presence. This is not just celebration, it is recognition. A declaration that Qin Mu's influence is no longer local. It is cosmological. Old allies return as witnesses, including scholars like Xu Shenghua and explorers like Lan Yutian. Each arrival is a political statement disguised as a congratulation. Emotional weight behind the ceremony. When the ceremony finally reaches its quiet center, the noise of the world fades. What remains is intimacy. Qin Mu and Ling Yushu are no longer surrounded by strategy or armies. Just memory, just distance finally closed. Their conversation is not about power, but about time, about how innocence cannot survive cultivation paths unchanged. And yet, how love still persists through transformation. This is one of the core emotional tensions of Xianxia storytelling. You gain the world, but risk losing the simplicity that made it meaningful. Final transformation, the painting world. At the end, the wedding does not conclude with grand speeches. It ends with something quieter. A brush, ink, paper. A world drawn by hand. As Qin Mu and Ling Yushu step into the painting together, reality itself becomes flexible, no longer bound by political tension or divine surveillance. Inside the painted landscape, they briefly escape the weight of existence. Not by running away, but by rewriting what world means. Closing reflection. So what does this wedding truly represent? It is not the union of two individuals. It is the temporary alignment of countless forces that would otherwise tear each other apart. And even then, the peace is fragile. Because in a world where even the moon can descend without warning, no celebration is ever just celebration. It is always a countdown to the next shift in fate. And the only question left is, when the next disruption arrives, will this marriage still stand at the center of the storm, or become the reason the storm finally begins?